Oh, my name is Todd Gibson, and welcome to CSCI 111, the first introductory programming course in the computer science program. The purpose of this video is just to give you a quick overview of the syllabus and more broadly of the format of the course. Whenever you log into the course shell through the Blackboard Learn, and nearly everything in the course will be provided on this shell. You're confronted by announcements, which I provided a name to, which is the daily diatribe. And after each class, I will post the topics that were covered in the class, as well as I'll post any notes that I typed in during class. Also, similar to how you see in this video, I actually record every single one of my lectures. So you can, and then a link to those recordings will be posted here in the announcements. So you can always go back and review what had been discussed. Or if you aren't able to make it a particular day, then you can go back and see the lecture that way. Let me actually start, before I dive into the syllabus, let me talk a little bit about what makes the course quite difficult, and that is that there are three areas that are being covered that the vast majority of people taking this course have had zero exposure to. So the first is the programming language, which is called C++. I guess I can... Oops, let me do this. All right, so the first is the programming language, which is C++. Very few people have used C++ who are in this course, it's assumed anyway. And it's not the easiest programming language to learn, so that's a bit of a hurdle right there. Second is that I would say nearly every single person in this course is either using a Mac or a Windows machine. And what we are using in this course, and in fact if you're a computer science major, what is being used in the entire curriculum is the Linux operating system. And so that in itself is alien to most people. On top of that, even though Linux provides a kind of graphical look and feel, the way that both Mac and Windows users are accustomed to, having icons that you double click on and pointing and clicking and dragging and dropping and things of that sort, we won't be using that in this course, nor in the entire curriculum. If you're a computer science major, we'll be using the command prompt and a text interface, which is precisely what I'm using right here, incidentally. So although the purpose of this video isn't to start going into that, just to show you what I mean, commands that I do are going to all be at a text prompt rather than being in a graphical interface where I'm double clicking and dragging and dropping and so forth. So all of these things working together make for quite a daunting experience when you first start out in this course, and there's a tendency to panic. So if you panic by, say, Wednesday or Friday of the first week, then at least use as some consolation that you aren't alone in that panic and that it is experienced by nearly everyone, and our goal is to get you beyond that. So using that is a bit of an introduction for the kind of the environment that the course is taught in. Let me go ahead and jump into the syllabus and review that. Okay, so I won't read all this. You of course can go ahead and read it. It's giving you just some information on what the course is covering, of course, here at the top. I would say first and foremost, you are learning a programming language. Everything is focused around how to write programs using that programming language. Again, that programming language we're using is C++. My office is O'Connell 222, Let me zoom in on this a little bit. Which is right down the hall from the room where the lectures will be occurring. And the office hours I'll be holding, there is going to be Tuesday mornings from 8:30 until 10, Thursday mornings 8:30 until 10. And then I'll also have an office hour on Friday from noon to about 1 o'clock. And I'm not having that one in my office. I'm having that one at Sylvester's. And if you're unfamiliar with the campus, Sylvester's is kind of located right in the heart of campus. It's a place where you can get coffee and drinks, and it has quite a large number of tables for seating and so forth. So in addition to these 4 hours worth of office hours, I'm also trying something different this semester, which is I'm tacking on some additional time. And I actually am having this additional time off campus. It's going to be on Friday mornings. So we have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Friday goes from 9 to 10. And so after that class ends on Friday, I'll go back to my office and get the notes for that day posted. And then I'm going to walk down to the Naked Lounge. If you're unfamiliar with the Naked Lounge, it is just a coffee shop that is in the heart of downtown. It's probably a 6, 7, 8 minute walk from the O'Connell building. And so after I get the notes posted for Friday's class, I'm going to walk down there and spend the better part of an hour and a half there. There's a couple large tables in the space, and I just plan on parking myself there and being available. So I just wanted a more informal environment. If you have specific questions, kind of office hour-y, can you help me with this or that? That's fine, but I'm also inviting you all to come down and we can work through problems. I can throw additional things at you and work through them with you. Just another informal opportunity for you all to have contact with me. So I wanted to try that this semester. And then you'll note that the way the timing works is Friday's class, I go to Naked Lounge for an hour and a half, and then what I'm going to do is head back to campus, and I'll do another hour there at Sylvester's on campus. So that's what's being shown with that structure there. Here's my cell phone number. You're certainly welcome to text me if it's a basic technology programming question. I would try using the discussion forum first prior to texting me, which is called Piazza. I'll speak more about that shortly. And of course, you can email me as well. A little bit of information on that everything's on Blackboard. Here are the categories, and we'll look a little bit more at these in context when I get back to the course shell in just a moment. There are about 6 projects in the course, and I would say every 2 to 3 weeks a project comes due. These are the larger items that you as an individual will code up and submit. Lab exercises. This course has 2 hours of labs, so we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the classroom, and then either Monday and Wednesday immediately after class or Tuesday and Thursday will be the lab sessions. And there's generally a lab exercise with every lab session. Just a short programming assignment to kind of reinforce what's being discussed in class. There are also quizzes. These quizzes are all in Blackboard online, in Blackboard Learn, so they aren't quizzes that I hand out. They're also not timed and they're open book. So the idea there is not to try and trip you up. It's merely an additional way to drive you to the content and use it as kind of a review and self-gauge yourself on how you're doing. It is, however, even though it is not timed and open book, it is a graded component of the course. And then finally, there are assignments. These not always, but generally are in class, and not always, but are generally on Fridays. So in-class activities quite frequently are under the category of assignments. And then there are 2 exams. There's a midterm and a final exam. I do have an item in bold here. I have the same thing in bold under the projects, which is that if your performance on the midterm or the final is 30% or less, then I may downgrade your projects to match your lowest exam grade. Now, the reason for that is to help discourage cheating. So if you are in earnest in the class, doing the assignments, doing the projects, it is virtually impossible to get 30% on one of the exams. Really, really hard. It is so easy to get partial credit on the exams that invariably, even if you're doing poorly in the class, if you're doing all the work, you will easily get above 30% on the exams. However, there are people who hire out others to write their code for them, that kind of thing, and so what happens is they're getting 100%, 100%, 100% on all the projects and assignments, and then come the exam and they get a 15, which is just an indication that they haven't been doing the material. And so that's the motivation for this particular bolded item here. There isn't late work. However, I will mention a little bit of a slop time factor that I have built into the submissions in Blackboard. I'll go over that when we get back to Blackboard. I've got a blank page that I don't need. All right. And then here's the grade breakdown. You can go ahead and look at that at your leisure. I don't do any scaling, so 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, and the minuses and plus are at the border, so 90 is an A minus, 89 is a B plus, otherwise A and B, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the policy, which you'll probably see on most syllabi here at the university, is the Title IX and the statements about not cheating, academic dishonesty. So that's the syllabus. Let's go back to Learn here, Blackboard Learn. Again, I don't have any announcements posted, so there's nothing to see there. What's due when? I have this right here at the top. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Let me start with pre-course setup, actually. So the first here is site registrations. You would have received a couple emails from me indirectly already, one from Piazza and one from Top Hat. Piazza is a discussion forum, and although Blackboard Learn here has a built-in discussion forum, one of the reasons I really like Piazza is that it provides an easy way to annotate code. So you can have text, and then you want to paste a bit of code in, and it looks really nice when that's in this particular forum. So that's what this is. It's just a free discussion forum. You click on the QA, and then there's obviously nothing here yet, but questions are posted and answered here. And you're certainly allowed to post anonymously. Also is Top Hat. Now Top Hat isn't free. It does have a fee associated with it. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. I'm going to shrink that. You can do it for $26 for a semester. One thing, although you may not be keen on paying the money for a semester's worth of Top Hat, note that there is no assigned textbook in the course, so there is no textbook cost. As an aside, the reason there is no assigned textbook is that the World Wide Web was invented by programmers, and if there is one resource that exists more than any other resource on the web, it is tutorials, how-tos, references on programming. So all the information and more that we could ever desire we can find for free on the web, so therefore there's no textbook. Top Hat, what is it that I use Top Hat for? Top Hat I use for a couple things. One is to take attendance, to see who's there. Each time class starts, an attendance code goes up. You just enter it in on your phone or on your computer, and it serves that purpose. Also, Top Hat has the ability to allow me to post kind of poll questions that the class can then answer, and those I generally post as anonymous answer questions to just move the class along. So for those two reasons is why I use Top Hat. So let me close that. Nothing to see there at the moment. Let me shrink that back down. Also on the pre-course setup is where can I write programs. So the vast majority of you are either going to be Windows users or Mac users. If you're a Mac user, you're in luck. As I said previously, the course and the entire curriculum is based on the Linux operating system. It turns out that Mac OS X has a version of Unix under the hood, and for our sake, we can use the words Unix and Linux interchangeably. So in essence, as a Mac user, you already have everything you need to write programs. Also available for writing programs is the department does provide a computer server that everyone is welcome to log into and use. If you're a Windows user, you have to jump through a few more hoops if you want to write programs on your own computer, but there are multiple options provided, and that's basically the purpose of this, again, under pre-course setup, where can I write programs, is showing you all of the options of where you can write programs, and if you're a Mac user or a Windows user, and how you get various things installed. So you'll want to take a look at that during the first week as we move forward and decide on where you want to be writing programs. Also, I will say that this ends up being a point of confusion for a lot of folks, and would definitely encourage you to ask questions in class, as well as see me in office hours or at Naked Lounge or what have you, to get your questions answered or issues resolved regarding that. So that's the pre-course setup. The daily diatribe is just a fancy name for the announcements that you see when you first come into the course shell here. Syllabus we've looked at. Here's a link to Top Hat. Here's a link to Piazza, which is a discussion forum. Alright, so I'll come back up to that in a little bit. So here are the main things that you're graded on: assignments, projects, quizzes, and labs. Let me jump into quizzes just briefly. So there's generally one quiz each week. As I said, it's open book and it's not timed. When you go into these folders, there's an overview that's provided, also external resources, so you don't have to search the web blindly for information on what we're covering in the course. If you go into these quiz links, you generally get a list of information of where on the web you can look for what we're talking about for a given week. Give you some things to try, and then the quiz itself, which tends to be multiple choice. So that's the structure of all these quizzes. Let me jump into 3, just so a little bit of an overview. Here are the external resources. Try these things, then take the quiz. All right. Quizzes are generally due on Wednesdays of each week. Labs, let me go ahead and do labs. So there is usually one lab per lab session, so there should be 2 of these a week, meaning that the first week's a bit odd, but week 2 is going to be 2 and 3, week 3 is going to be 3 and 4, or excuse me, 4 and 5, and so on and so forth. These labs are, so here's a description. They tend to be very, very short programs that you have to write. Now, as far as grading the labs, these are actually graded automatically. And where you submit your code for grading is this system called Turn-In. And here at the top of the labs, I have a link for submitting labs. You can log into the system. Now this is going to look a little bit different because I'm an instructor and not a student, but each lab is listed, and there will be a way for you to a link, but basically you click on to submit your code that you've written, and then it'll compile it and run it, and it'll do a little comparison and tell you whether you did the lab correctly or not. The initial labs will give you some practice in doing that process. So that's the deal with labs. So quizzes due on Wednesdays, labs occur on the 2 lab sessions. The labs, even though they're assigned once per lab session, they actually don't come due until late in the day on Friday, so that you have a little bit of extra time to get those done. Alright, so we can look at projects. I said there are 6 projects. Here they are. There's certainly a possibility I may change up the ending ones, but these initial ones are pretty much in place. So there's a description of what needs to be done, a way of submitting the project. So all that will be covered in quite a bit of detail once we get to that point where we're ready to start working on the first project. We're definitely not there yet. And then finally, assignments. As I mentioned, these generally but not always are on Fridays, and are generally but not always done in class. I would say the big exception for these assignments is this very first week. There are quite a few small assignments assigned this first week to try and kick things off. And in particular, assignment 1 and assignment 2, I'll speak just briefly about. It says maze via Blockly. So it's asking you to complete 10 puzzles, and then once you've completed it, what you do is you attach a photo or a screenshot of your solution to the last one that you completed, the 10th one you completed. You'll note that this is very pictorial. It's not C++ at all. The motivation for assigning this particular activity, this assignment, is that it forces you to think the same way that a programmer needs to think in order to solve problems. And a lot of these are very, very trivial early on, but the later ones, in particular, number 10 is quite challenging. And if I haven't done it in a while and someone asks me to do number 10, I may sit there for 10 or 15 minutes myself figuring out how to get it right, because it really makes you think the same way a programmer thinks without all of the extra stuff of Linux and C++. So the motivation, as I said, was to get you to think like a programmer. The reason I want you to think like a programmer early on is for you to decide very early on whether you think that this course specifically, or computer programming in general, is for you. If you find this activity miserable and are unable to do it, and you don't like this particular way of having to scratch your head and figure things out, then maybe programming isn't for you, and maybe this course isn't the best course for you to be in. One of the big struggles for the computer science department is this 111 course, because it has a very high attrition rate. Somewhere between 25 and 30% of the people who enter this class end up dropping, withdrawing, or failing the course. And so to avoid people getting between a rock and a hard place in the middle of the semester, the course is front-loaded with a lot of these activities, which are just kind of these picture drag and drop type things to give you a good feel for whether you think that programming is for you. All right. So that's the whole reason behind that first assignment, and actually to a certain extent the assignments 3 and 4 end up being the same kind of thing. The other assignment I wanted to talk about in this video, however, is assignment 2, which is a group video. So during the first class I will be assigning everyone in groups, and this will be an assignment where you go out with your group and produce kind of an introductory video, and I'll go over that in class, but I just wanted to make mention of that now. So that covers, I think we've got all of that there. the discussion forum, the attendance and polls that I do. All right, so now I can jump up and quickly talk about what's due when. I have this at the very top. You come into the course, you want to know when things are due. I will be posting one of these every week. It will tell you when things are due. So note the pattern. I said quizzes in general are due on Wednesday of the week. Excuse me, I should be clicking on that. And labs, so here's, this week only has one lab. Generally there are two labs. If there are two labs, they would both be due on Friday of the week, Friday night. And then, again, week one is a little bit odd because I've got a large number of assignments in here. And in this case, I have two assignments due Friday evening and then another assignment which we'll get Friday in class, which will be due on Sunday. So a bit of a weekend assignment for you to do. So all this information can be here. I do want to point out the asterisks. The first 2 weeks of this course are pandemonium. People are adding, people are dropping. No one's done any of this stuff before, and it's all very confusing. So these asterisks are saying you may submit late without penalty. All these things basically have an additional week tacked onto them before they're due. So if you don't get this stuff done, that's kind of the expectation. Don't worry, by the end of next week you should have a better idea of what's going on and be able to submit them by that time. In red here I have something called video bits. So this is a short video. The videos tend to be somewhere between usually around 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. Occasionally one will stretch to a half hour, but in general I try to keep them short. And this is a video, almost always it's a video captured from a previous semester of me giving a lecture on a topic, and it's just a video for you to watch prior to the start of the following week. And it is not something that you can skip and not watch, because in general the stuff in the video I do not talk about. And yet you'll be expected to know the information in the video to be able to do the work that following week. In this case, the work that will be in week 2. So that's the purpose of the videos. And if I come back here, so that's the what's due when, and then finally I have these video bits. So when the videos are referred to here, that the videos can be found in this link here, and this is each of the videos mentioned. And I think that about does it for what I wanted to talk about. Of course, I would encourage you to ask questions in class about anything I've talked about here, ask in office hours, or get an account on Piazza and ask a question there. That's perfectly fine as well. So with that, welcome to 111, and we will see you in class.